I never thought that paying off my mortgage would end up being the start of a hostile takeover. I stood at the threshold of my kitchen, dish towel still in hand, when Ashley barged in with her 2 kids, dropped her designer bag on my entryway bench, and declared, "We're gonna live here now." David followed close behind. Not a hug, not a, "Hi, Mom," just a shrug. His silence was as loud as her arrogance. "We talked about this," Ashley said, like I'd missed a memo from my own life. "You have all this space, and it's family property now, right?" Family property. The words clanged in my chest like church bells at a funeral. I looked around my modest 2-story house. The floors I'd scrubbed, the roof I'd patched, the small garden out back with the bird bath I'd restored myself. Every inch of it bore the calluses of my hands, the decades of labor and love I'd poured into it after losing my husband. "I don't remember agreeing to that," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Ashley rolled her eyes. "Well, it's not about you anymore. We've got the kids to think about." David didn't meet my eyes. Just a week ago, I had stood at this same kitchen counter and felt proud. I'd written the last mortgage check. $12, $438. Debt-free at 71. I'd brewed myself a cup of Earl Grey and toasted in silence to the life I'd managed to build and protect after losing Daniel. But now I stood frozen, betrayed, in the very house I'd saved. Ashley's boys had already kicked off their shoes and raced upstairs, their giggles echoing through the hall as they claimed what had been my quiet space. "You should be proud," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You raised a son responsible enough to take care of you." That was the moment I knew something was off. This wasn't care. This was conquest. She patted my arm like I was some frail elder in her way and turned toward the fridge. David finally spoke. "It's just temporary, Mom." And there it was, the lie dressed as kindness. I nodded once because I couldn't trust my voice. I watched as Ashley pulled out my leftover lasagna like she owned it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to Ashley's children stomping above my ceiling, and I whispered to the dark, "You picked the wrong woman to corner." 2 weeks earlier, I'd stood in this same kitchen with a checkbook in one hand and my late husband's photo in the other. The final mortgage payment, $12, $438, was a number that had sat in my head for years like a finish line. I wrote it slowly, savoring every digit, every loop of ink. When I dropped it in the mailbox, I exhaled in a way I hadn't since Daniel passed. I remember thinking, "You did it, Dorothy. On your own, start to finish." I didn't call anyone. There was no celebration. Just me and a cup of tea, sitting at the kitchen table while the sun painted gold across my tile floor. My hands shook. Not from age, but from pride. My house. My rules. David hadn't helped with a single payment, not even once. But years ago, when the roof needed patching, he had come over for a weekend to help spread tar and felt like that had earned him some sort of moral deed to the place. I'd thanked him then, made him pie, sent him home with leftovers. I was always thanking him for scraps of decency, like he was doing me a favor by showing up at all. Ashley had never helped. She hadn't lifted a finger except to criticize. At Thanksgiving, she rolled her eyes when I used coupons. "Honestly, Dorothy, it's just butter. Buy the good stuff." Once, she smirked across the table and said, "You should just let us renovate the upstairs. Turn it into a guest suite. Maybe you could live there one day when you need more help." She said help, the way people say hospice. That day had left a taste in my mouth I couldn't wash out. But I let it go, because David looked embarrassed, and because the grandkids were watching. Now, here I was, brushing crumbs off my own counter, while Ashley rummaged through my refrigerator like it was a communal fridge in a college dorm. "Is this your yogurt?" she asked last night. My yogurt, my house, my damn mortgage. I was invisible in my own kitchen, but I wasn't confused, and I wasn't powerless. That's what people like Ashley count on, that you'll stay quiet to keep the peace, that you'll tell yourself it's just temporary, just family, just a misunderstanding. But I've lived long enough to know, when someone helps themselves to what's yours, the clock is already ticking. The question isn't if they'll take more, it's when. And now, it was my turn to ask a question. What exactly are they planning? The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Ashley always laughed at my habits, my coupons, my handwritten recipes, the way I reused foil if it wasn't torn. "Your generation is so precious," she said once, folding a napkin like she was performing an autopsy. David just looked away. I used to think I was being overly sensitive, that maybe I was a little old-fashioned, but now I see it for what it was, erasure, one tiny comment at a time. The week after they arrived, my home started changing shape. Ashley reorganized my pantry without asking. She put my tea tins in a plastic tub labeled dry goods. She replaced my blue and white towels with beige ones. "Neutral colors make the space feel bigger," she said, like I was living in a showroom. "And David?" He unplugged my landline without telling me. "Nobody uses those anymore, Mom." Each time I objected, gently, carefully, I was met with that same patronizing tone. "Don't worry, it's just temporary. We're trying to help." Help. Ashley said the word like it was a threat. Like when I came home from the market one afternoon to find her in my sunroom, my sacred space, flipping through paint swatches. "What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't even look up. "Just ideas. This room could make a great yoga nook. The carpet's got that." "Old person smell?" "Old person." I turned and walked out before I could say something I couldn't take back. But it was eating me alive. Every breath in my own home felt borrowed. And then came the final straw. I overheard her in the hallway, talking on speakerphone to one of her friends. "Yeah, we're staying with my MIL for now. It's basically ours eventually. She's just sort of squatting in her own future guest house." Squatter. That word lodged itself in my chest like a shard of glass. My own son was in the kitchen the whole time. He heard it, said nothing, just stirred his coffee and scrolled his phone. That was the moment the switch flipped. I stopped hoping they'd come to their senses. I stopped telling myself it was a phase. And I started watching, really watching. Because Ashley thought I was slow. David thought I was weak. They had forgotten who raised him, who buried her husband and stood back up, who taught neighborhood kids how to read and built a home from nothing. They wanted to treat me like a squatter? Fine, let them. But squatters have nothing to lose. And that makes us dangerous. After they went upstairs that night, Ashley's heels clicking like a countdown on the wood floors, I poured myself a cup of tea and went to the hall closet. I reached behind the old Christmas decorations, behind the beach towels no one used anymore, and pulled out the fireproof lockbox. They didn't know it existed. Of course they didn't. Ashley probably assumed all my important papers were in a kitchen drawer next to the rubber bands and soy sauce packets. Inside that box was the seed of my salvation. In 1989, the year Daniel and I refinanced the house, the bank manager had advised us to add a transfer on death clause to the deed. "You'll be the sole owner if anything happens," he explained. "And you can assign beneficiaries yourself later." Daniel had nodded. "Let's protect her." The document was notarized in blue ink and stamped with a seal that had faded slightly but still pressed deep into the page. My name, Dorothy Allen Miller, was clear as day. And right beneath it, in Daniel's precise cursive, the line that mattered most: sole ownership upon death of spouse. Right to designate heirs at will. It had sat in this box for 35 years, undisturbed, waiting, like a loaded weapon in the back of a closet. I held the paper in my hands, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. Let Ashley play Lady of the Manor. Let David pretend he was doing me a favor by letting me stay in my own home. This paper said otherwise. This paper said they had nothing. And here's the thing about legally binding documents. They don't care about entitlement. They don't care about manipulation. They don't care how many throw pillows Ashley arranges or how many times David says, "Mom, don't overreact." I placed the deed on my dining table and turned on my banker's lamp. ran my finger down the page slowly, breathing in the scent of aged paper and cheap ink. They thought I was naive. But what they didn't know, what nobody seemed to ever really understand, was that I'd spent decades quietly helping neighbors fill out probate forms, track down property tax exemptions, and correct their wills. I never bragged, never charged. I just helped, because I knew how fast people lose everything when they don't know where to look or what questions to ask. And now I knew what I needed to do. The house wasn't family property, it was mine. And I wasn't going to die quietly just to make things easier for my son's wife. By Tuesday, I'd had enough of hiding strength behind smiles. I took the binder, wrapped it in a brown grocery bag, and drove to Evelyn's office. Evelyn Matthews had been my husband's probate attorney 23 years ago, when Daniel passed after that long winter of surgeries and silence. She'd held my hand through paperwork I didn't think I could bear to sign. She was the kind of woman who kept folders alphabetized by the hour and wore dark lipstick even to her own mother's funeral. Her receptionist still remembered me. "Mrs. Miller," she said, her eyes lighting up, "you look wonderful." I didn't feel wonderful. I felt furious in slow motion. Evelyn came out from her office herself, wearing one of those navy suits with sharp collars that always made her look like someone you didn't argue with. Her hug was firm, warm. "Dorothy, it's been too long." We sat in her office surrounded by polished wood and walls lined with legal encyclopedias, the kind nobody really reads but everyone wants to see behind them. I opened the binder and slid it toward her. I need to know what rights I still have, and I need to be very sure before I go to war. Evelyn didn't smile, but her eyes narrowed in that familiar way I remembered from Daniel's probate hearings. Focused, clinical, dangerous. She flipped through the pages like she was counting offenses. "Transfer on death clause is solid," she said. "And you've never refinanced in anyone else's name?" "Never." "And no one else is listed on the title?" "No." She closed the binder, tapped her pen twice, and sat back. "Then I'll make this simple. You are the sole legal owner of that property. No one has a right to occupy it without your consent." I exhaled. Not relief. Not yet. Just clarity. Can they do anything to change that? Not legally. But if they're living there, squatting as you say, they can complicate things. Especially if they try to fabricate paperwork. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even told her about the worst parts yet. About the listing Ashley had hidden in her purse. About the little things they were saying to the kids, like this was already their house. "I don't just want them out," I said. My voice was quiet but hard. "I want it documented. I want every piece of their manipulation on record." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then we'll do this carefully, quietly, and thoroughly." I left her office with a folder full of copies and something I hadn't felt in weeks, a plan. That night, I sat in bed with Evelyn's printed notes beside me and a legal pad in my lap. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. Ashley had taken the boys to their swim lessons, and David was downstairs watching TV like he didn't have a mother upstairs building a war chest. It hit me how strange this was. All my life, I'd fought to keep peace. I'd been the oil on water, smoothing over arguments, stretching paychecks, hosting every holiday dinner so no one felt left out. And here I was, lining up evidence against my own son and his wife like they were strangers at a deposition. But maybe that's what they'd become. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person to them. I was a stepping stone, warm, familiar, and easy to stand on while they reached for what they thought they deserved. I didn't cry. That had passed. Now, I just made lists. Evelyn had been clear. To prevent future claims of implied co-ownership, we needed documentation, not just of my legal status, but of their behavior. That meant texts, statements, photos, any sign that they were planning to treat my home like theirs, especially if they intended to sell or alter it without consent. I titled the first page in block letters, "Goal, Protect Ownership, Secure Future, Expose Manipulation." The second page, Contingency Plan, Future Heir, Document Intentions Now. Because now I understood, this wasn't just about kicking them out. It was about the long game. If anything happened to me tomorrow, Ashley would twist the story. David would shrug and sign whatever she put in front of him. I needed to name a future heir, put it in writing, make it public, make it strong. I flipped to the third page and wrote, "Who deserves this home?" Not David, not Ashley. Maybe my niece in Oregon, who still sent me handwritten Christmas cards. Or my goddaughter Lena, who once spent a whole summer painting my garage just because I taught her to read. Someone with love in their hands, not entitlement. Someone who understood that this house wasn't just real estate. It was where I kept Daniel's voice alive, in the squeaky stair, the porch swing, the perfectly measured garden rows. By the time I turned out the light, I had 5 pages of names, steps, and deadlines. They thought I was stuck, that I was cornered, but I wasn't. I was calculating. The next day, I was cleaning. I wasn't snooping. At least, that's what I told myself when I found Ashley's purse flopped open on the kitchen stool, her usual careless habit. She and David had taken the boys out for ice cream and furniture browsing. That's how she phrased it, like the couch she had her eye on was just another whim, not a plan. I was wiping down the counters, trying to ignore the ache in my knees, when I noticed the corner of a paper sticking out of her bag. Bright white, thick stock, not a receipt. I should have walked away, should have pretended it wasn't there. But I didn't. I pulled it out slowly and felt the weight of the first breadcrumb fall into my palm. Zillow listing draft, property, 47 Hawthorne Lane photos pending. Estimated sale price, $398,000. Agent prelim inquiry, Ashley Miller. Relation, family owner. My hands went cold. It wasn't just a note. It wasn't a fantasy. They were planning to sell my house. Before I'd even finished my tea, before I'd told them no, they'd made the mental leap from visitors to owners, from pretending to ask for help to quietly planning my erasure. I flipped the page over, printed 3 days ago, the same week I made the final mortgage payment. Not after. Before. That was the part that broke something small in me. The timeline. They hadn't even waited. They'd assumed the finish line was theirs to cross, not mine. I stood in my kitchen holding a piece of paper that could have cost me everything if I hadn't known better. And I knew what I had to do next. I scanned the listing on my laptop, saved it to a secure folder, and emailed a copy to Evelyn with the subject line, Ashley's intent, Exhibit A. Then I made a second copy and hid it inside my old sewing machine, the one no one had touched in years. Let them say it was a misunderstanding. Let David pretend he never saw it. Let Ashley laugh it off like I was being dramatic. I wasn't documenting to prove anything to them. I was documenting for the clerk, for the judge, for whatever lawyer Ashley's parents might hire when things started unraveling. I wiped the counter again, this time with a focus that felt almost surgical. They wanted to erase me. From the deed, from the house, from the memory of who built this home, but they forgot who put every tile down, who paid every bill, who watched the plumbing and the mortgage and the mold in the attic like it was a second job. They could write me out in their heads all they wanted. On paper, I was writing them out. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, not anymore, but from focus. The listing draft sat beside me on the kitchen table, the words family owner burning like a brand. I opened my laptop, scanned the document, and saved it twice. Once to my desktop and once to an encrypted flash drive I kept from my estate work days. Then I did something Ashley wouldn't even know how to Google. I opened the file's properties, metadata, the digital fingerprints behind every document, creation date, author, last edit, device type. I clicked through tabs slowly, sipping my tea as if I were browsing recipes instead of pulling back the skin on their entire plan. Created, Friday, 6:42 p.m. device, MacBook Pro, registered user, D. Miller David's laptop. Last opened, Sunday, 9:03 a.m. printer, Canon TS 6220 IP address, matched my Wi-Fi network. They hadn't even left the house to do it. David opened the file the same morning he told me, "Don't worry, Mom, we're just here for a while." Ashley had printed it from my home's internet. On the very printer I'd bought for coupons and school worksheets. I saved a screenshot of the metadata, added it to my folder, emailed it to Evelyn. Then, I sat back and stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was shocked anymore, but because something deeper, colder, had settled in. This was premeditated. They didn't stumble into this. It wasn't desperation, it was design. A plan formed before the last check cleared, before I finished what I started 27 years ago, owning my home outright. And the most insulting part? They were sloppy. They'd underestimated me to the point of laziness, left tracks like toddlers in wet cement, because they assumed I was just the tea-sipping gentle grandma who made casseroles and kept her nose out of big decisions. They forgot I used to file tax returns for 6 households in my spare time, that I'd once found a clerical error in a city water bill and saved our neighbor $2,000. I printed the screenshot, highlighted the dates, slipped it into the binder between Exhibit A draft and Exhibit B metadata. That's what this was now, a case file. They could decorate the spare room all they wanted, hang up dream catchers, and rearrange my pantry. But one thing was becoming very, very clear. This wasn't their house, and this wasn't going to end how they thought. I waited until Sunday evening, after the boys were tucked in and Ashley had poured herself a glass of white wine like she owned the sunset. David was at the table, feet up, scrolling his phone. I sat across from him and laid the printed Zillow draft down between us. He didn't look up right away, but Ashley did. Her eyes narrowed slightly, just for a second. Then she gave that little smile, the one she always used before saying something condescending. "What's this?" "I found it in your purse," I said, calm, direct. "Is there something you'd like to tell me?" David finally looked over, read the title, and leaned back. Ashley scoffed. "Seriously? You're snooping through my bag now?" I didn't blink. "You left it open. I was cleaning." She rolled her eyes like I'd accused her of a traffic ticket. "It's just a silly draft. I was playing around on Zillow, that's all. Everyone does it." David folded his arms. "You're overthinking, Mom." That's when I saw it. The switch. From sheepishness to gaslight. The way David tilted his head like I'd forgotten something obvious. Like I was being the difficult one. "You really need to stop working yourself up," he said. "Ashley was just browsing. You know she loves interior design. She listed herself as family owner," I said quietly. Ashley laughed. "Oh my God, Dorothy, it's a template. Those are placeholders. You can change them. Honestly, maybe you're forgetting again." That stung. Not because I believed her, but because I knew exactly what she was doing. Subtle insinuation, suggesting confusion, slipping again into the sentence like a seed, planting doubt. I didn't respond, just stared at her. "You okay, Mom?" David added, softer now. "You've seemed kind of daft lately." I almost smiled. That was the play. Pretend I was slipping. Make me question my own memory. Maybe even get me to say something that sounded unstable. "Off," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Right." I picked up the paper, folded it in half, and stood. "Well," I said, "if it's nothing, then you won't mind if Evelyn takes a look." Ashley's face twitched, just once. The name landed like a stone on glass. "Evelyn?" David asked. "That lawyer? From Dad's will?" "Yes," I said, turning to the hallway. "She's very interested in this draft." Behind me, I heard Ashley mutter something, too quiet to catch. But the tone? It wasn't dismissal anymore. It was worry. And that's when I knew they'd planned this carefully, but not carefully enough. 2 days passed before the next breadcrumb arrived. I didn't have to go looking for it this time. It came to me. I was in the garden, pulling weeds by the fence when my neighbor Jeanette called out from her porch. "You got a minute, Dorothy?" She had that look, the one people get when they're holding something too hot to sit on. I walked over, wiping my hands on my apron. Jeanette glanced at the upstairs window of my house before lowering her voice. "I thought you should see this," she said, tapping her phone. "Ashley texted it to my niece last week. Didn't know we were related. Small world, huh?" She turned the screen toward me. "Ashley, Once we move into Dorothy's, we'll save $2,000 per month. Already mapping out paint colors. The upstairs bath is going to be so cute. The date stamp was a week before they moved in. My mouth went dry. I asked Jeanette if she'd mind forwarding it to me. She nodded. Already did. I thanked her, tried to smile, and walked back inside like my knees weren't trembling. I added the screenshot to my evidence folder. Exhibit C, neighbor's text. Clear intent to take residence and remodel. I thought that was it for the day. But later that afternoon, Ashley's youngest came into the kitchen while I was loading the dishwasher. "Grandma," he said, "we went to the furniture place today. Mommy picked out a new couch for our house. She said it's going to match the big rug we're getting. She said you can still keep your chair though, 'cause it's got vintage vibes." I froze. He was 6, just repeating what he'd heard. I nodded and gave him a cookie. And as I wiped the counter, I realized they were conditioning the kids too, shaping the story early so there'd be no question down the line about who lived where, who owned what. Ashley wasn't just planning to take over my house, she was rewriting me out of it. One rug, one paint color, one cute bathroom at a time. But kids don't lie. Not when they're that little. And texts don't lie either. I opened my laptop and typed up a timeline. Dates, screenshots, statements. I wasn't just gathering receipts now. I was building a prosecution. They wanted to act like this was some natural transition, a family helping each other, a mother being gently eased into obsolescence. But no, this was a hostile takeover. And the beautiful thing about hostile takeovers, the paper trail always tells the truth. Evelyn called me at 8:17 the next morning. No pleasantries. "Dorothy," she said, "we have a problem." I was sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee. David had just left for the gym. Ashley was upstairs on a video call, probably redecorating her Pinterest board with photos of my living room. "What kind of problem?" I asked. She sighed. "I went to the county clerk's office yesterday to pull your deed record. Just routine. I wanted a certified copy for our file. Something felt off. My stomach tightened. Someone filed a quitclaim deed on your property 3 weeks ago." My hand clenched around the mug. "What?" "It's recorded, Dorothy. In their system. On paper, it says you transferred partial ownership to your son." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No," I said. "That never happened." "I know," Evelyn said. "That's the problem." She paused, her voice lower. "The signature doesn't match your records. It's been forged, sloppily, but enough to cause damage if it goes unchecked." I set the mug down carefully. I was shaking. Not with fear, with fury. They hadn't just planned to take over. They'd already started. I thought of Ashley sitting in her robe, making brunch plans with my neighbors, like she was on a long vacation. I thought of David, my son, saying, "You're overthinking, Mom," while he forged my name like it was just another chore on his to-do list. Evelyn continued. "They filed it quietly, didn't push for a full transfer, just partial, probably so you wouldn't be alerted. But if we hadn't checked, they could have built on it, sold their share, filed for full ownership after your death." "After my death," I repeated. My voice didn't crack. "Not anymore." Evelyn's tone changed, sharper now. "But this is good, Dorothy. It's criminal. Forging a deed is felony fraud. We can void it. Press charges if you want." I nodded slowly, though she couldn't see me. I'd been building a case for weeks. Now I had the smoking gun. "You still have that lockbox?" she asked. "Everything's in it," I said. "The original deed, the transfer on death clause, every receipt since 2002. "Then we've got them." I hung up and looked out the window, where the boys were tossing a ball in the yard, my yard, laughing like everything was fine. But something had snapped into place. This wasn't about boundaries anymore. This was theft. And they were about to learn what happens when a woman who's been underestimated decides to stop being polite. I didn't sleep that night. Not from plotting, not from fear, but from grief. The kind of grief that doesn't come from death, but from clarity. The kind you feel when someone you raised becomes a stranger, and worse, a threat. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the occasional creak of the floorboards upstairs. David's steps. Ashley's laugh, muffled behind a closed door. My house, echoing with sounds I used to associate with life. Family. Now it felt like a crime scene. I'd imagined betrayal before, little hurts, times when David forgot my birthday or didn't call on the anniversary of his father's passing. But this was a deliberate choice, a signed lie entered into public record, an act that said, "You're in the way." I kept replaying it, how he'd stood in my kitchen, calm as could be, sipping his coffee while the wheels of illegal fraud were already in motion. I wondered how he justified it to himself. Did Ashley do the convincing? Did he just nod and agree, like always? Or did he come up with the idea on his own? That question hurt the most, wondering if David had been slowly walking toward this for years, and I just kept holding the door open. My chest ached in a way I couldn't name. Not panic, not heartache, shame. Because I'd always believed I was raising a decent man. Because I'd ignored the signs. Because I'd let them move in. I thought of Daniel, how he used to run his thumb along the edge of our mortgage statement, proud of every line item paid. He'd worked weekends, coached Little League, skipped vacations. Also, this house would be our legacy. Something David could inherit when the time came. Not steal. I got out of bed at 2:40 a.m., walked barefoot to the kitchen, and sat down with a pen. I wrote it all out. The timeline. The feelings. The moment the switch flipped in my heart. And then I wrote one sentence I never thought I'd need to say out loud. I no longer trust my son to act in my interest or safety. It broke something in me to admit that. But it also hardened something. Because once you face the truth, the full, brutal truth, there's no going back to the version of you that tolerates less. In that moment, I stopped being David's mother, and I started being my own advocate. Evelyn called the next afternoon with a voice like ice wrapped in velvet. "I've scheduled a family meeting," she said. "You'll say it's about inheritance, clarity, and future planning. Nothing confrontational. I want them relaxed." I pictured David's smirk, Ashley's smug nod. They'd walk into that conference room thinking they were about to be handed control on a silver platter. Good. Let them think that. We set it for Thursday, 2 days away, at Evelyn's downtown office. Neutral ground. Not my house, not their turf. Somewhere with leather chairs, legal pads, and a framed certificate on every wall. I spent those 2 days getting ready. Not just gathering documents, but steadying myself. I ironed my best navy blazer, wrote out a brief list of what I needed to say. Short, sharp, unemotional. This wasn't about screaming or crying. This was business. Evelyn sent over a checklist, original deed, county fraud report in progress, screenshots of the Zillow draft and metadata, text from Jeanette's niece, statement from the neighbor's kid, if needed, copy of the forged quitclaim deed, enlarged and annotated. She added a final note at the bottom. Let them speak first, always. People tell on themselves if you're patient enough. On the morning of the meeting, Ashley came into the kitchen humming, dressed like she was headed to a brunch photo shoot. "Thanks again for doing this, Dorothy," she said. "It's so important to plan for the future. I know it's overwhelming." I smiled. "Not at all, dear. I've been planning for this for quite some time." David kissed my cheek before heading out, like we were some happy sitcom family going to discuss holiday wills and where to hide the silver. I packed the folder last, slid it into my tote bag, and looked around my kitchen one final time before leaving. The tea kettle, the ceramic pie dish, the floor Daniel and I laid ourselves on a Sunday afternoon in 1998. They wanted to turn this place into a listing. I wanted to turn it into a lesson. At Evelyn's office, the receptionist greeted me like I was the one in charge. She offered me water. "They just arrived," she whispered. "She's wearing sunglasses indoors." I smiled. "Of course she is." When Evelyn opened the door, she gave me a quick nod, the kind you give someone about to perform surgery on themselves. "Ready?" she asked. "I've never been readier," I said, because this wasn't just about proving I owned my house. It was about showing them they'd never been in control. Not for a second. The air in the conference room was thick with fake politeness. Ashley walked in like she was interviewing for a reality show. Sleek bun, oversized sunglasses, and a lavender folder labeled House Plans. David followed behind her, looking bored, flipping through his phone like he didn't have felony fraud hanging over his head. Evelyn stood when I entered. Professional, composed. She gestured for us to sit at the long mahogany table. Ashley crossed her legs. "Dorothy, thanks for putting this together. I know this kind of stuff can be intimidating." I smiled. "Oh, I've always found paperwork rather calming." Evelyn cleared her throat, took out a file, and began. "Thank you all for coming. The purpose of today's meeting is to ensure clarity around property status, inheritance intentions, and legal ownership of 47 Hawthorne Lane." Ashley leaned forward, all false sweetness. "Perfect. That's exactly what we were hoping for. With 2 kids and a growing family, we really need stability. It's time we formalize things." David nodded like this was a routine business arrangement. Evelyn didn't blink. "Before we discuss future planning, I'd like to ask a simple question, and I want your answer on record." Ashley's smile twitched. Evelyn pressed on, calm as a surgeon. "Are either of you familiar with the legal requirements surrounding property transfer in the state of Missouri?" Ashley blinked. "Well, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, obviously." David cut in. "We just thought it made sense to get ahead of things, you know? Be practical. She's not getting any younger." I didn't flinch. "Let them dig." Evelyn nodded. "And did either of you file any documents related to the deed or title of 47 Hawthorne Lane?" David's face shifted. Just a flicker. A crack. Ashley spoke too quickly. "We wouldn't do anything official without your permission, Dorothy. We're family." Evelyn opened her folder. "Interesting." She laid the forged quitclaim deed on the table. Enlarged, highlighted, circled, in red. Ashley's face went bone white. David stiffened. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "This document was filed 3 weeks ago with the county clerk. It claims that Mrs. Miller transferred 50% ownership of her home to her son. It bears her signature. Forged." Silence. Then Evelyn turned to them slowly. "Forgery of a deed is felony fraud under Missouri law, punishable by prison time and permanent loss of claim to property. As of this moment, Dorothy remains sole owner of the residence. Any further attempt to occupy or control the property without her consent will be considered trespassing." David opened his mouth, closed it again. Ashley stared at the paper like it might burst into flames. I sat still, calm, every ounce of anger replaced by something sharper. Victory! For a moment, no one moved. Ashley's fingers tightened around the handle of her lavender folder. David's jaw tensed, like he was holding in something. Anger, maybe. Or panic. Evelyn turned to me. "Dorothy, would you like to proceed with your documentation?" I nodded and reached into my tote bag. The first thing I laid down was the Zillow draft, printed from Ashley's own purse, her name at the top, the phrase family owner, underlined in red. I slid it forward without a word. Ashley's lips parted. That was just a draft. I held up a finger. Next, the metadata screenshots. File created from David's laptop, printed on my home network, dated before the mortgage was paid off. David blinked hard. His mouth tightened into a thin line. Then came the forwarded text message from Jeanette's niece. "Ashley, once we move into Dorothy's, we'll save $2,000 per month." Ashley's face flushed. "That was taken out of context. That's private." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You sent it. You confirmed intent. That's context enough." I didn't smile. The final document was a timeline, neatly typed, itemized, stapled, detailing every action taken without my consent. I placed a copy in front of each of them. David didn't touch his. Ashley pushed hers away. And then Evelyn stood, clicked a remote, and the projector lit up. On the screen, the forged quitclaim deed, side by side with a verified signature from my bank records. The forgery was laughable. The R in Dorothy curved the wrong way. The handwriting too clean, too rounded. A child could have spotted the difference. Evelyn stepped forward. "We've already submitted a fraud report to the county clerk's office. The forged deed will be voided. A notice of sole ownership will be reinstated by end of week, and any attempt to represent this property as co-owned, including on real estate listings, loan applications, or design plans, will be considered criminal misrepresentation. Ashley's eyes were wide now, fear creeping in, dulling her smugness. David finally spoke. "You didn't have to do this, Mom." I turned toward him slowly. "No, I didn't have to. I chose to, because you both crossed a line and thought I'd be too tired to stop you." Ashley whispered, "This is a misunderstanding." Evelyn cut in, voice like a knife. "No, Mrs. Miller, this is evidence." For the first time, Ashley sat back and said nothing. Because what do you say when the mask is ripped off? When the truth is up on a screen? You stay quiet, and you lose. David looked smaller now. The man who once towered over my kitchen table, telling me I was overthinking, sat hunched in a leather chair like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. Ashley, for all her usual flair, had gone dead silent. Her eyes flicked from the projector to the papers like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist. Evelyn didn't ease up. She paced slowly in front of the table, voice calm but unrelenting. "Let me be very clear. What you attempted to do constitutes felony fraud. Forging a property deed is a serious offense, punishable by up to 7 years in prison under Missouri statute. This isn't a warning. This is your last breath of grace." David opened his mouth. "I thought it just helped things move along." "Help?" Evelyn said, turning sharply. "By removing your mother from her home? By preparing to list the property behind her back? By forging her name on a county document?" Ashley finally spoke, voice trembling. "I didn't know about the deed. David handled that part. I thought she—" Evelyn cut her off. "Intent does not erase involvement. You printed the Zillow listing from her Wi-Fi, from her printer. You referred to her as a squatter, Mrs. Miller." Ashley turned to me, eyes suddenly wide with something that looked like fear. "Dorothy, please. This has gone too far. We never meant to hurt you." I met her gaze, steady. "You tried to erase me," I said, "but I'm still here." Evelyn stepped forward, final folder in hand. "These are your options. 1. Leave the property immediately and cease all attempts to interfere with ownership. 2. Face a formal fraud investigation, with all gathered evidence submitted to the county prosecutor's office." David's face fell. "We have nowhere else to go. That," Evelyn said, "is not Mrs. Miller's problem." The shift in the room was sharp. You could feel it in the air, like the moment a storm breaks and the wind changes direction. I wasn't the one being asked to explain myself anymore. They were. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it. Let them feel what it's like to be powerless in a room full of receipts. Because this wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity. And in that moment, everything became crystal. They weren't the strong ones, the clever ones, the entitled ones. They were desperate. And I was done playing small. Ashley cracked first. The silence had barely settled before she burst into tears, loud and gasping, like someone just told her the cameras were still rolling and this wasn't going to plan. "This is all your fault," she snapped at David, tears streaking her mascara. "I told you we should have just waited. I didn't want to fake anything." David looked stunned. "You didn't mind the couch measurements. You didn't mind the paint swatches. Don't pin this all on me." Ashley whipped around to Evelyn. "He dragged me into this. I didn't even know she still had the deed. He said it was handled." She sounded like a teenager caught with stolen makeup. Sorry she got caught, not sorry she did it. Evelyn stood quietly, letting it all unfold. David slammed his hand on the table. "I did this for the kids. You think I wanted to move back in with my mother at 39? The words hung in the air. Back in with my mother. Not into her home, not with her blessing, into possession. That had always been the plan. I kept my voice steady. "You didn't move in with me, David. You moved over me." His face twisted. "You don't understand what it's like out there. We're drowning, Mom. I thought maybe you'd do something useful with this house instead of sitting in it alone." There it was, the rot at the root. Not desperation, entitlement. Ashley turned to me, suddenly sweet again, desperate. "Dorothy, please, we just need time. A few months. The kids." "No," I said quietly. Her mouth hung open. "You had time. You had decency. You chose neither." David's shoulders slumped. No more arguments. No more excuses. Only the sound of Evelyn collecting her files. "We'll be sending formal notice by morning," she said. "If you're not out within 10 business days, legal action begins. Police will be informed, locks will be changed, the forged deed will be publicly voided and noted for future record." Ashley buried her face in her hands. David looked like he wanted to speak, but no words came. Not this time. For the first time since they'd entered my home, I didn't feel tense or confused or hurt. I felt clarity. Let the neighbors whisper. Let Ashley spin her version to whoever will listen. I had the facts. I had the law. And now, finally, I had control. The meeting ended with no hugs, no goodbyes. Just the quiet clicking of a door closing behind them. And that was fine with me, because the next door I planned to close would be my front one. For good. The next morning, Evelyn filed the fraud report with the county clerk. The forged quitclaim deed was officially under review for criminal voidance. Within 3 days, I received written confirmation. Document determined invalid under statute. Fraud suspected. Investigation pending. It was black ink on white paper, and I'd never felt such a clean kind of relief. No more maybe, no more gaslighting, just facts. Evelyn had a courier deliver the official cease and desist to the house. She insisted on that detail. Not email, not a casual drop-off. Formal, traceable, inescapable. I watched from the front window as the courier handed the envelope to David on the porch. He looked stunned, like this was still some kind of misunderstanding, like he hadn't spent weeks trying to erase me out of my own life. Ashley didn't even come to the door. She didn't have to. The entire neighborhood already knew something was wrong. Jeanette told me that her cousin heard Ashley arguing on the phone in the driveway 2 nights ago, shouting, "She lawyered up." Damn right I did. By Friday, Evelyn had submitted a notarized affidavit to the county clerk's fraud unit with all supporting evidence, exhibits A through F. By Monday, I changed the locks. Legally, properly, through a bonded locksmith with a receipt signed and filed. I left David a copy of the locksmith invoice taped to the front door. No note, no emotion, just finality. That same afternoon, I walked room by room and reclaimed every inch. Ashley's yoga nook? Gone. The beige towels? Bagged up and donated. The boxes labeled nursery redesign? Moved to the porch with a tarp over them, waiting for pickup. The boys were with their aunt for the weekend, probably to shield them from the fallout. I hated that they were caught in this. They didn't deserve it. But I'd be damned if guilt softened my spine now. That house had Daniel's handprint in the cement by the garage. My grandmother's hutch in the dining room. Love layered in drywall and memory. It wasn't theirs to take. Not by charm, not by forgery, not by blood. David texted me 2 days later. "We need more time. Think about the kids." I didn't respond, because I had thought about them. That's why I was doing this, to protect the truth. To protect what a family home should be. And now? Now the law was on my side. And paper doesn't lie. They were gone by the following Thursday. No goodbyes, no note. Just a moving truck that came at 6 a.m. while I was watering the front hedge. David didn't look at me as he carried out boxes. Ashley kept her sunglasses on the whole time, even in the early morning shade. I stood on the porch with my tea and watched them load up the last of their entitlement. The final box was labeled Grandma's House Office. The irony nearly made me laugh. Once they drove off, I walked inside and exhaled so deeply it felt like I hadn't really breathed in weeks. The house was mine again, not just on paper, but in feeling. The air shifted, the walls settled. It no longer felt like I was holding my breath in my own home. I spent the next day scrubbing every room. Not out of spite, out of reclamation. Ashley's essential oil diffuser? gone. David's ergonomic gaming chair? Donated. In the upstairs bathroom, I found a sticky note on the mirror. Faded pink ink. Don't forget to switch this out when she moves. I stood there for a full minute just staring at it. Then I peeled it off slowly and flushed it down the toilet. The garden had suffered during all this. Too many days of distraction, not enough attention. But I went out with my gloves and a trowel, and I got to work. That Saturday, I planted roses. Not in the backyard, where they'd be hidden, but along the front fence line. A row of them. Red, vibrant, unapologetic. It wasn't just gardening. It was a message. This space is mine. This home is mine. This peace is earned. When I finished, I stepped back, brushed the soil from my palms, and let the sun warm my face. Neighbors waved. Jeanette brought over pie. Even her cousin stopped by to say, "Good for you, Dorothy. You handled that like a queen." But I didn't feel royal. I felt right. That night, I sat in my recliner with a blanket over my lap, tea beside me, the silence no longer heavy, just full. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was proud. Because I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I stood. I proved. I documented. They came to take what they thought was free. Instead, they got something they never expected. Accountability. And me? I got my home back, my roses, and a kind of peace you can't forge. You have to fight for it. And I did. I really did.